What's up, geeks and gamers? It's Odin coming back with a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw the global opening of Avatar: The Way of Water, making $435 million. And even though that is shy of the $450 million made by Doctor Strange earlier in the summer, what Avatar: Way of Water has forward is the fact that it is going forward into the holiday season, where not only will you have many kids off from school, but also many parents off from work on several of the days. And so the thought is that even though this is coming in underneath a film like Doctor Strange, that the day-to-day numbers will be a little bit better, that the drop-off won't be nearly as drastic as it was for Doctor Strange, and that because of that, this film will end up making a little bit more than what Doctor Strange did. Remember, Doctor Strange, basically capped out right before getting to $1 billion, only made it to around $950 million or so. Avatar, I suspect, still right now, I do think it's possible for the film to get to $1.5 to $2 billion when all is said and done. What people are, I think, forgetting, because some people have already made videos talking about the $17 million Thursday preview showings and saying, oh, it's a bad sign, and oh, they were expecting it to make $500 million, and it's coming in beneath that. All of that is absolutely true. But what's also true is that the only screenings that are really selling for this movie are the premium ones. So IMAX 3D showings, any of the other premium formatting, right? Dolby Vision, any of those very expensive showings, right? With the best quality, the best possible picture quality, sound quality. Those are the ones that are selling well for this. When you look at the other showings, at least in my area, they're not really selling all that well. When I looked at the opening night and Friday showings for this movie, there were all tickets sold. Like, there were a bunch of tickets sold for the IMAX 3D showings throughout the entirety of the day. When I looked to the regular 3D showings and even the 2D showings, there were almost no tickets. There were actually some showings that had maybe one or two, some that had even no tickets. Now, that does not mean that no one's going to see the film, because $435 million tells us otherwise. But what that does tell us is that there's not a lot of people going as far as physical bodies, but because the average ticket price is a lot higher now versus where in the first Avatar film came out 13 years ago versus, other films too, because this is having so many more of those premium showings and those premium formats than some of the other films that have been released even just this year. What that's telling us then is that people are going to see it, but they're specifically going to see it in the very highest format, which means that it's going to be one of the more expensive formats as well. So for anyone who's going to try to write this film off, this is coming from someone, by the way, as you all know, if you watch Friday Night Tights, I had a spat with Jeremy on this because he liked the film. I thought the film was trash, just like the first film. So I'm not a fan of this movie, but when it comes to the box office numbers, I will always try my very best to be as objective as I can with them. And $435 million for an opening weekend for a film that's been 13 years in the making is still a strong opening weekend. We'll have to wait and see what it does over the holidays. I mean, that's even what Deadline's pointing out, saying, hey, the box office fate will be determined throughout the holiday season. I'm still someone where I think we can get a pretty good idea once we see that week 2, week 3 number, more so for this movie, because its week 2 is going to go up right against Christmas, with Christmas itself falling on Sunday, right, falling next Sunday specifically. Maybe it'll be our third week that we'll get a better idea of how the legs are on this movie, but the film is still doing quite well. A lot of people are skipping this weekend because they couldn't get premium seats. They couldn't get the best seat possible in the IMAX 3Ds because those are the only ones that are selling. So some people are actually holding off for the next week or next 2 weeks in order to try to say, if I'm going to spend this amount of money, if I'm going to spend 3 hours of my life, which I would, again, argue, I don't think you should do, because I think it's a complete waste of your time, because this movie's terrible. It's a waste of your time. But if you do feel that way, then it does at least make sense to me that if someone is actually looking forward to it, actually wants to go see this, that they would want to go see it in the best screen possible, have the best seat possible to be able to have the overall best experience they possibly can. This is also the new age kind of the movie-going population as it continues to recover from COVID times, right? A lot of those habits that were formed prior to COVID and all the shutdowns and all the nonsense, right, were broken by the theaters being shut down, etc. And so even Avatar and even massive films like it are going to be impacted by it. Now, I don't think we're going to see the same type of numbers that we saw, for instance, with Top Gun Maverick, where that one came in well beneath this number worldwide in its opening weekend, but had a historic drop, like historic low drop from week 1 to week 2. Very positive word of mouth, like so incredibly high word of mouth, incredibly high positive word of mouth, that it was able to get itself to 1.5 or roughly 1.5 billion. This is one where it's going to start off stronger. It's going to have probably bigger drop-offs comparatively, but because of the season in which it's coming out in, the weekday performance performance, I think, is going to be a little bit better than what Top Gun was dealing with. And so that will be a film I think will be worth comparing it to see what the day-to-day numbers, the day-to-day numbers domestically are. Not to mention, this film will absolutely be a much bigger international film than domestic. As you can see, the domestic opened to $134 million when this was projected to open to $150 to $200 million, so well below the projections of what they were saying. And again, I think that speaks a lot to not just the film itself, but also to just the state of the movie-going population these days with, again, the only real seats that are selling being those premium seats. And I think that's a fair point to be bringing up. Going to the actual box office charting over on the numbers, as of the recording of this video, Avatar: The Way of Water is reported to have made $134 million. That's $31,000 per screen. That's a very good per screen number there. We have in the number 2 spot Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, which is still hanging around. So $5.4 million, dropping 52%. So again, I thought that the drop would be probably over 50% with Avatar taking up the vast majority of the marketplace, but it is still hanging around in that number 2 spot. And with that being said, I think that the film, because it's going into the holiday season, it does still have a little bit of extra room to run. Now, some might say, I think that's the death knell for the movie. Some are reporting that it's got a $100 million loss. Again, I don't agree with the numbers. I don't agree with the assessments of channels that are saying that personally. A lot of that's based off of reports of higher marketing costs for the movie. The problem is that, though, if you're going to say, all right, there's higher than expected or higher than usual marketing costs, if you're going to have to say, or you're going to try to bring that up as a reason for a film to need to make X amount of money more, well, then you're going to also, if you're going to go that route, say, okay, well, then how much extra tax credits did they get? How much, free publicity did they get? How much money are they getting from any type of product placements or other deals like that? All the other revenue streams. And unless you can actually pinpoint every single one of those things, I just honestly just don't think it's a good assessment to make, because yes, you might have even reported data coming out, but if you don't have those extra details, if you're going to go beyond the norm, and typical marketing is 1.5 times the budget, if you're going to go beyond that, then you're going to have to include all of those other extra things. And that's one of the reasons why I don't do that, and why I just go by the standards. I try to keep everything as standardized as I can, because is there a possibility that the break-even number is higher or lower? Yes. But the best chance, or really the most accurate number, is going to be the one that's somewhere in the middle. And so that's why I stick with whatever is standardized. And so Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, not a box office flop, has made some money, and is still on track to probably get to about $800 million when all is said and done. It has slowed down tremendously. There's no doubt about that, especially internationally. I think it only added another 2 million or so internationally, so that's very bad. Again, Avatar: Way of Water is going to definitely eat up all the markets that Black Panther was playing in. But domestically, and I said this from the very beginning, do not sleep on the domestic number there. I think that this film is going to continue to be able to bring in numbers that are pretty strong throughout the rest of the holiday season, as I think it's going to get kind of that holiday season bump and protection that some films do. I think once January hits and people go back to school, it's going to drop like a light. But before that time, do not be surprised if this film adds on, again, up to maybe even up to $450 million. Now, that's well below the $500 million I was expecting for this movie originally, but still, that would be enough to push it over the edge to get to a potential $800 million when all is said and done. I still think that is definitely on the table. Again, my range for the film was 800 to 850. I think it's getting a lot closer to the 800 and again, the lower $800 million range now for that film. Violent Night came in the number 3 spot, dropping 43%, has now made its money back. Strange World continues to be a massive flop. The Menu continues to add a little bit of extra, so this is another one of those movies where maybe over the holiday season, if it's able to make, again, a couple million here or there over the next few weeks, could actually end up making its money back as well. But we'll have to wait and see where that film stands when the end of its run. Avatar, as you can see, $434.5 million. Again, that's still a massive worldwide total. I think the film is terrible, and I don't think it's worth your time or your hard-earned money. But the fact is that the film is making money. It's making a lot of money internationally, and it'll be very interesting to see where this film falls, not only against the first Avatar, because I don't think this film's going to get anywhere near the first Avatar, but it's also going to be interesting to see where this film falls up against films like Top Gun Maverick, which is currently the highest grossing film of this year, getting to almost $1.5 billion. I think the range right now for this movie is 1.5 to 2. I'll have a better idea of that range next weekend when those second weekend numbers drop, but there will definitely be a caveat, being that next weekend is Christmas, and that does have an impact on the box office one way or the other. Black Panther, now at $776 million, so less than $25 million away from $800 million, and I still think that that is a possibility. Again, the domestic number, I think, is going to be what drives it forward. Internationally, it's pretty much done. Maybe it gets to 360, tops 375. I don't see it getting 375, but again, holiday season, you never know. But definitely, north of 360. And for this number, I do think that there probably is still enough in the tank to be able to push this film closer to $450 million. And again, I just base that off of how these films tend to do over the holiday season with people being off from school and from work. Those numbers will just be a little bit higher. Remember the discount Tuesdays, right? Those have to be taken into account as well. So I do think that the overall money for this film is going to be coming in. Regardless of any of that, the film, far cry from the $1.3 billion of the first movie. And because of the inflated ticket prices of this compared to when the first film came out, just like with Avatar, there are a lot less people going to see these movies. So even though this film is doing well, financially at this point, there is still no denying, especially when you remember, and I mentioned earlier, right, that people are only going to see this in the highest format possible. And so therefore, it's a much smaller number of people spending that much more money to get to the number where it currently is. You're not seeing the same number of people going to see it. You're not seeing the same number of tickets being sold for this movie compared to the first one, which makes complete sense to me because I don't think the first one really aged all that well, but that's just my own personal thought on that. Let's go ahead and jump into the box office charting because we love to do charting here. So that $434 million right now, based off of the projected, what they have told us as far as the budget, they have told us that the budget is somewhere between 350 and 400. I'm going closer to $400 million in my estimates because there was something interesting from, I believe it was Deadline, that said that there are some reports coming out, not officially from the studio, but some reports that the film costs upwards of $460 million production budget. That's not marketing, but just production budget. At $400 million, though, the film would need to make about $1 billion to break even. So based on typical marketing costs, it would need to make about $1 billion. Now, James Cameron has gone on the record to say that the film's going to have to make somewhere closer to $2 billion. Now, he didn't say that number. He said this film's going to have to make, have to be one of the highest grossing films of all time in order, or at least of the last several years, in order to just break even. And so therefore, the interviewers have been able to, and the news sites have been able to extrapolate $2 billion from that statement that he's made. But if that were true, that would mean that the actual production budget alone would have to be close to $800 million, and I just do not see that as being likely or possible for just one of these Avatar films. For two of the Avatar films, for three of the Avatar films in total, okay, maybe we're talking some more sensible numbers there. But $400 million is already a crap ton of money. So the film costs $460. That sounds about right too. But $800 million, just no chance in heck that that's possible. But the $1 billion break-even point that I have it currently set at, right now it's at $339 million in the red. And I think it's going to make up a lot of that by next weekend. And I do think that this film will end up being in the black for the box office. But the fact that it costs so much, the fact that the break-even is so high, even if the film does get to $1.5 billion, that's still a very small return on your investment. Even if it gets to $2 billion, it's still not as strong of a return on your investment as you would want from a movie like this, especially when the first film, when adjusted for inflation, made almost $3.5 billion. It's going to be far off and a far cry from that, especially when you keep in mind how many less tickets are being sold. For Violent Night, as I mentioned, it is now broken even with $3 million in the black for that movie. Strange World, still $235 million in the red. Devotion, still also a massive financial flop. And then, as I said, with The Menu, right now it's at $60.8 million worldwide, $8 million in the red. So it still has a good chance, or still has a chance, I should say, by the end of the holiday season to make its money back, but we'll have to wait and see. And then talking about Black Panther, I think that it will probably end up around $800 million, which would put the film at $100 million in the black, not in the red. Again, I've explained as to why I disagree vehemently with those that are saying that this film is a financial failure. We can talk about how bad this movie is. We can talk about how bad this film is doing in comparison to the others. We can talk about how this film within the grand scheme of the MCU is terrible, and also how the number of ticket sales are a far cry from what we saw back in 2018 with this and with Avatar: Way of Water. But we should not go towards the limits, and we should not go towards those other things that could easily be argued against to try to, again, speak about the negativity or speak negatively about this movie. We don't need to go there, right? We don't need to say this film is a financial flop to be able to say that this film is definitely not in a good position in the history of the MCU, especially when you look at those ticket sales and ticket prices. Look at the numbers.com actually has this chart. If you go to the numbers and you go to the box office and you go to annual box office, they actually give you the total tickets sold for a movie. Wakanda Forever this year only sold 45 million tickets versus Top Gun Maverick's 78 million. All right. So Black Panther, and this is, of course, just the domestic numbers here. So this is not including anything internationally. But when you take that number and then you compare that to the 2018 tickets sold for the first Black Panther film, you're going to see a giant discrepancy. And that's because the average ticket price is a lot higher today, not just because of inflation, but also because a lot more showings of this were in higher format, therefore higher priced screenings versus what you saw in the original Black Panther film. And that's, again, also what is driving a lot of what Avatar: The Way of Water's numbers are. But those are the numbers as they currently stand. Just wanted to explain that. So what are y'all's thoughts about it? Let us know in the comment section down below. Also, make sure you smash that like button, light that fire button, honestly, smash the rumble button wherever it is that you're watching. And again, have a beautiful rest of your Advent. This is the fourth Sunday of Advent. A wonderful rest of your day, a blessed Sunday. And as always, God bless.